The Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa is hosting a research seminar to discuss the findings from studies on safeguarding of democracy in the age of growing mistrust. Between 2009 and 2021, the IEC commissioned the Human Sciences Research Council to undertake numerous election-related surveys to gauge levels of public perceptions and trends in the attitudes and interests of South African voters in electoral democracies and voting. For more, let's cross to SABC News reporter Natasha Phiri, who's in Sandton. A very interesting conversation, Natasha. So the studies were conducted over a 12-year period. Why are these studies significant, and what did the speakers say are the patterns and trends in electoral democracy in South Africa?
Definitely a very interesting, dialogue or seminar here. Various presentations that were presented by the various speakers and researchers and academics. And, it was quite a busy morning, Desiree, with all these numbers and the graphs that they've been showing us. But of course, the importance of these, presentations is, like you said, to gauge the levels of public perception and trends in the attitudes and interests of South African voters in electoral democracy and voting, particularly that you would remember that in the 2021 local government elections, the voter turnout was quite low, Desiree. We had, over 26 million people heading to the polls, but of course, very low turnout in terms of, young people coming out to the polls. In terms of, just the statistics and demographics, in terms of the females, you had over 14 million females voting, constituting of 55.23%. In terms of the males, over 11, constituting of 44.77%. But all these presentations that were made by the Human Sciences Research Council, by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, and lastly by the Citizen Survey, actually paints a very grim, picture, Desiree, in terms of the voter turnout, in terms of some of the reasons why, these voters actually don't go to the polls, as we've previously seen. And some, have cited that the electoral decline or electoral interest, has actually decreased. The trust in the Electoral Commission has also declined as well. And I think every speaker somewhat highlighted this. There are also barriers. They highlighted the barriers for voter registration, some saying political disinterest. There was also some researchers that actually highlighted a disinterest or trust deficits between, institutions like Parliament, like the Electoral Commission as well, and the level of partisan declining amongst young and educated voters. And of course, if this trajectory is to continue, Desiree, then it really is, something to worry about, especially because we are preparing for the 2024 local government elections. Just after this session, the tea break, there will be a question and answer session with the panelists. Of course, we will be engaging with, members of the Electoral Commission about, these studies and what they think, about these studies. It will also be good to actually, gauge their interest in terms of their preparations for the 2024 elections, and especially around issues of, electoral reform, the Electoral Amendment Bill. You would know that Parliament had until June to actually, deal with that issue. But of course, that deadline has been extended to December, which is quite worrisome, Desiree, because remember, 2024 is just more or less 18 months away. And of course, the Commission actually has, a lot of work, ahead of them in coming to those 2024 national polls. But of course, as SABC News, Desiree, we are still camped around here for the entire day. We will be bringing you, live coverage and, of course, some commentary from the various speakers here, and, of course, the various commissioners from the IEC.
Of course, Natasha, one other question that comes to mind is how the IEC is hoping these conversations will impact that national and provincial poll coming up in 18 months. Are they hoping to persuade South Africans to go out and vote?
Definitely, Desiree. They actually are hoping to sway South Africans to vote, but also, I mean, the IEC is somewhat being accused lately. Yesterday we just spoke to Action, I beg your pardon, not Action SA, but One South Africa Movement activist Musi Maimani, and he was somewhat blaming the IEC for these problems, saying that the integrity of the IEC actually comes under question. And such seminars are actually good for the IEC to take stock of their mistakes and possibly rectify where they can. But in terms of voter education, they still have a long way to go in terms of wooing the public, especially young people, seeing that in these studies young people actually don't even show an interest in voting or the current political systems that we have in the country. So really the IEC has its hands full trying to woo and educate those young voters into coming out in the polls in their numbers.
Natasha Phiri there in Sandton at the IEC research seminar discussing the findings from studies on safeguarding democracy in the age of growing mistrust.